Welcome to Unpacking Peanuts, the podcast where three cartoonists take an in-depth look at the greatest comic strip of all time, Peanuts by Charles M. Schulz.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. This is Unpacking Peanuts, the 200th episode, and I'll be your host for the proceedings. My name's Jimmy Gownley. I'm also a cartoonist. You can find all my work over on Gville Comics on Substack, and you could read them for free. Joining me as always are my pals, co-hosts, and fellow cartoonists. He's a playwright and a composer, both for the band Complicated People as well as for this very podcast. He's the co-creator of the original comic book price guide, the original editor for Amelia Rules, and the creator of such great strips as Strange Tractors, Gathering of Spells, and Tangled River. It's Michael Cohen.
Say hey.
And he's the executive producer and writer of Mystery Science Theater 3000, a former vice president for Archie Comics, and the creator of the Instagram sensation Sweetest Beasts. It's Harold Buckholz.
Hello.
And making sure everything runs smoothly and keeping us out of trouble, it's Liz Sumner.
Howdy.
Guys, it's episode 200. We did it.
Wow.
That was our goal.
200.
So we can quit now.
So, Liz, how many roughly comic strips does that mean we have covered?
200 at least.
Was that like, well, why do we do like 15 episodes a show? Or 15 strips a show, rather?
Average, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's so Harold, that's a lot, right?
That's all.
But judging by my quick math.
Yeah, we
That's
asked
a lot.
Harold because he's the one who knows numbers.
Let's say 3,000 plus. Okay. That's impressive.
3,000 plus comic strips we've covered. That has been just fun. What a blast. Do you guys have any reflections, any thoughts here on this momentous occasion?
Well, thank you. Thank you to the people listening.
Yeah.
If we didn't have people listening, we wouldn't be doing this. And it has been a joy to do this. I have learned a lot in a lot of regards, but specifically, I think related to great cartooning, because you can't help but have a few things rub off on you when you keep looking at amazing work and talk with amazing people who have insights that open your mind to what comics can be. And that's in that spirit, I think that's what this episode for me is going to be, is us kind of looking as cartoonists after having 200 episodes to explore Schulz through the lens of another cartoonist and see how he stacks up from his perspective. So I'm looking forward to a 200th episode doing something a little bit different together.
I'm looking forward to it too, because I don't have to read the strips.
Yeah.
At 200 episodes ago, I was the instigator behind wanting to do this, but the one thing I did not want to do was read the strips out loud. And everybody's like, you have to read the strips out loud, otherwise there's no show. And I was like, no, we can talk around it, or I could get someone else to do it.
Right.
But there was no way to do that.
Right.
And I ended up doing it myself. And I guess it's been fun.
It's been great.
You have this superpower.
You've been wonderful.
Well, thanks.
But I will say, to celebrate our 200th anniversary, we're moving to all AI reading from now on.
Have you guys seen the AI CEOs getting booed at commencement?
Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So fun.
It's a crazy world.
It takes hubris to show up and tell kids, get used to it. Yeah, it's been fun. Michael, what are your thoughts here, 200 episodes in?
Well, it's easier than I thought, because I'm not a public speaker. I never wanted to be a public speaker. Jimmy forced me to be a public speaker. So at least I know now I can do it. But also, I think we could do a show on anything we all like.
Yeah.
And certain things certain topics run dry pretty quick. And there are very few topics that the more you get into it, the more interesting it gets. I feel that way about the Beatles.
Yep.
Like, the smaller the detail, the more interesting.
Yeah.
I feel that way about Game of Thrones. It's like, you can get into the nuances. It doesn't get boring. You can talk about, was this guy the cousin of his grandfather?
This guy that doesn't exist and never has.
Yeah, I find
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings, infinite. You don't run dry. You just get into, like, how many hairs do they have on their toes? Anyway, but Peanuts is like that. You know, even the strips I really wasn't interested in turned out to be worth thinking about and talking about.
That's awesome. Well, that makes me feel great. And the other thing that I think is funny, because you guys said this fairly recently when we were talking about some other milestone we reached, and you both said, oh, well, I wasn't sure I'd be able to do it.
Mhm.
I was like blown away by that. I'm like, what do you mean? I knew I had zero doubts in my head that not only could you guys do it, but you were the only people I could do it with. So that's shocking to me. Maybe it just says something about my overblown sense of self-confidence that I assume you guys have it as well. But you should.
We're grateful for your overblown sense of self-confidence.
There was no doubt in my mind.
Overblown senses of self-confidence sometimes can work out quite well.
Yeah, you got to use it judiciously.
Yes.
Okay, so Harold alluded to what we're going to be doing this episode. And what we are going to be doing is looking at the work of C.C. Beck, who did the famous Shazam comic, which at the time was called Captain Marvel, and his 7 Deadly Sins of Cartooning. But before we do that, I came across a thing on YouTube. YouTube has started pushing these YouTube shorts, and I had avoided like TikTok like the plague, but these YouTube shorts basically are TikTok on YouTube, and they're insidious. It's just insidious. Anyway, so I ended up finding a couple of these people I was interested in. And this one guy, an Irish fella, I just thought was very entertaining and interesting, and he did a video on how he became a successful influencer.
Okay.
A content creator, I should say. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk to you guys about it and see the overlap with the way a comic strip, at least the way Schulz approached it.
Yeah, we sure could use a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn about how to be a successful content creator. So, yeah, absolutely.
So he's like, okay, the first thing you need to know is you have to post every day. Obviously, that goes right along with the daily comic strip.
Yeah. Success. Okay.
Even more if you can. And he said, this is his exact quote, quantity over quality.
Wow.
Especially in the early days. Now, hang on. The reason being, you put a bunch of stuff out there, some things will click with people, some things won't click with people. The things that come back to you where people are like, that was awful, you don't do those again. Things that get little attention at all, maybe you tweak it or you give it another try. You make sure it gets rejected rather than it just disappears.
So let the world decide what you're doing that has meaning. The more chances you get for someone to tell you that, that's success at the beginning. Is that kind of his take on it?
In one sense, it will tell you what to eliminate.
Okay.
And in another sense, it'll say, oh, these things are people are responding to. So therefore, those are the things you do more of. For example, obviously, Lucy in the psychiatry booth, right? Everybody likes it. Linus in the blanket. Everybody likes it. You do more. Eventually, this becomes your brand, and then you sustain it. And that's how you become a successful content creator. So much of that reminds me of Schulz, including the fact that he would still introduce things as he goes along, but with the same process of, if people hate it, I throw it out. If they make no reaction, I tweak it, reintroduce it. If they love it, I do more.
It's interesting that number 2 one, that's kind of the controversial one. When you had a syndicated daily strip, you created a strip and put it out there, whether you liked it or not. Make it as good as you can, but you didn't have a chance to self-censor unless you were willing to throw out a finished piece, which he did. Schulz did do occasionally. I think we've heard of that, but it's rare, and it's a lot of work, But the fact that you are obligated by a contract with a company that you are beholden to turn out something every single day, whether you could call that quantity over quality, because if you didn't have that over your head, how many strips would you put out? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a difference between somebody with a contract with multiple newspapers and someone who's just putting stuff out on his or her own channel on YouTube.
Definitely. Well, that's the other part of this that I want to talk about, because I'm watching this video, and I'm like, this is really interesting and really fascinating. And I'm like, okay, is there a way I could look at this as someone who's putting stuff online who basically hates it? I basically hate social media across the board. The only thing I like doing for fun is podcasts. But I don't like Instagram or any of that stuff, but I'm forced to do it. So I'm like, well, this guy's fun and interesting. This is a valuable path. But here's the thing that I found out. So I had watched, probably 24 short videos by this guy, right? He's funny primarily. But then after watching this video where he explains how he achieved it, and he has over 1 million followers on YouTube. He has something like 400 and some thousand followers on Instagram. Wow. Now, so I did a deep dive and I looked at his earliest videos.
Yeah.
And there he is holding a beautiful Martin acoustic guitar.
Oh.
The strings are brand new. They're shiny and they smell of brass and hope, And now he does reaction videos of snack foods.
Wow.
So my point being,
yes, go on.
he makes a living as a content creator, which was his goal.
Yeah.
But it is so far afield from being an Irish folk singer, which is what he started as.
Right.
So as to not be the same thing at all. I don't think there's any danger we could have done that. I don't think we could have started off with Unpacking Peanuts and accidentally ended up with like a stock futures podcast or something.
No.
Or let's try all the Hershey products.
And I think that is one of the things about podcasts is you choose a lane and you put out 10, 20, 60 minutes of content along a theme, and you have to just kind of double down, right? And it's not like you're doing a Instagram post and you had your cat in it and people love the cat and all of a sudden you're doing stuff with your cat.
Right.
It's much harder, I think. And we're basing it on the life's work of someone we really admire. That's why we're here, right? So yeah, it's interesting that podcasts don't lend themselves right to that. I think the way other really bite-sized social media can. But
right.
In YouTube and discoverability and just everything's different. Podcasts seem to be like the most stodgy the thing that you could possibly do that would be considered maybe social media.
Which is why we picked it, of course.
Yeah, we're stodgy. Yeah.
We're stodgy.
Yeah. My 100-year-old references are kind of make a little bit more sense in this world.
Yeah, but I also think what Liz said is interesting and part of it, because there's some sort of what the missing component is that the syndicate and the newspaper editors, because however the newspaper editors were looking at it privately, on a business level, they were investing in you.
Yeah.
They're like, we bet that your comic strip is going to be good enough to hold our readers' attention, and we'll give you $7 a week for it, or whatever it was. Right?
Yep.
That's the part that's missing. And that's why Schulz could explore and get to the World War I flying ace, but he's not there saying, Sanka is a better brand than whatever, Maxwell House. They talk about old references.
But he is trying lots of different things over time. He's not cramming it up with like, I'm going to do it.
But all
within
things. The context of it's always still being some peanuts.
Yes.
There have been comic strips that have changed 180 degrees, right?
Sure.
I mean, Barney Google. Do you guys have any other examples that you could think of?
Well, Mary Worth was originally a slapstick comedy.
Of course, everyone knows
that.
I'm
kidding.
Phew.
But yeah, there were.
Well, yeah, Dagwood Blondie definitely was.
Oh, that's another great example. Yeah. Blondie was a flapper, and Dagwood was like a rich guy that she was dating. Yeah,
and you got a kind of an urban thing with Barney Google, and it turns into a rural comedy with Snuffy Smith.
I don't know. Schulz is a different case completely. Just because, you got to make a living, you got to feed your family, but he got way past that, and that was always been the question I had about Schulz and his motivation is he was the most successful person in the field by far.
Not even close.
And he could do whatever he wanted. Nobody was going to tell him no. So, he didn't have to do anything. He could do whatever he wanted. And he stayed in his lane. That's what he liked.
Yeah.
But he did not have that pressure of like, okay, if I blow this, I'm going to have to get a job at an insurance company.
Yeah.
He's way beyond that.
Pretty quickly, right?
So, the people on social media, which I don't follow all that much, seem pretty desperate to me.
Yeah.
Attention. Yeah, but you're not doing what you love anymore.
Right.
And so it's kind of, to me, it's sad.
Well, that's how I felt watching those early videos of this guy. And he has a gorgeous singing voice. He plays guitar beautifully. And he's given, the Canadian Kit Kat 4 out of 10, I'm happy that he's successful, but
yeah, and I'm hoping he's going to go do some gigs at the local pub.
And that's the other side. Then are you able to then turn that? Can you look at it as something completely separate, as just promo for the thing you really want to do?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So this is just what I wanted to sort of talk about, because I wish there was a way we could find that keeps people able to experiment, but it had that safety net that they were still doing the thing that they loved.
Well, frankly, nobody could have been doing any of this stuff 20 years ago.
Well, that's true.
And, someone like C.C. Beck didn't have a whole lot of choice. Well, because we're going to be talking about C.C. Beck a lot later in the show. Super successful in the field. I mean, his comics were selling over 1 million, which nobody comes near today. But, his worldview is basically, hey, I'm drawing comics and making money. What else do I need?
What else do I need? Yeah.
And we're going to find some real pragmatism in his way of seeing things that I'll be interested to hear what your perspective is on, because it's kind of along the lines of this social media guy who obviously chose the path to enjoy a number of snack foods and rate them and get paid for it versus, playing his guitar and singing. So I'm fascinated by the people that are so pragmatic, or how they balance the pragmatism with the idealism of art that's kind of baked in. Schulz is an interesting mix of pragmatism and idealism, and I think it served him well.
Yeah, it played out okay for Sparky.
Yeah, he did. He did okay for himself.
All right. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to do the 7 deadly sins of cartooning. Harold is going to take us through it, the C.C. Beck manifesto. So come back in a second. We'll be here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening and engaging with us. Your appreciation makes this effort a real pleasure. And now we're asking that you support our work. If you enjoy the show, we hope you'll join us on Patreon as a contributor. Those of you who can't for whatever reason, that's okay. We've been there. We're glad you're here. Thank you for being an essential part of Unpacking Peanuts.
All right, here we go. Harold, talk to us about C.C. Beck. What are we going to do here?
All right. So the title, I hope, of this episode is Charles M. Schulz and the 7 Deadly Sins of Cartooning. The 7 Deadly Sins of Cartooning were created by a man named C.C. Beck, who we alluded to. I'm assuming the majority of people listening do not know who C.C. Beck is, and why on earth would we listen to C.C. Beck when he makes a 7 Deadly Sins of Cartooning? Because what we're going to do is list off what he's saying, the 7 deadly sins, and they're going to think about it in context of Schulz, kind of like what we just did with the how to post on social media for success. And we're going to talk about it as cartoonists and as an amazing editor. What is this guy saying? And what do we see in Schulz that either makes that stand out as true or possibly kind of proves it false? Because Schulz, we say, is the greatest cartoonist, did the greatest comic strip of all time. And C.C. Beck, here we'll go. I'll give you, for those of you who don't know who he is, I'm going to try to connect the dots. So this is the connect the dots section that's something that's related to C.C. Beck, maybe you have heard of, and this will give you some context for what we're about to talk about. So, in 1919, William Fawcett started Fawcett Publications in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. So there's number one connection to Schulz, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was a soldier in the Spanish-American War, and he put out a little publication that took off like wildfire that ran in the 20s, was super popular. It was called Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, because William Fawcett
From the Music
was
Man.
Captain Billy. There's another connection. If you ever seen the musical Music Man and the famous song You've Got Trouble, when Professor Harold Hill is trying to rile up everybody to think that they need to buy band uniforms and instruments for their kids because they are otherwise going to become juvenile delinquents. It kind of was the epitome of the beginning of the Roaring 20s following World War I. So that was his first publication. He went on to create an empire of publishing. He started I think it was either Mechanics Illustrated or Popular Mechanics, super popular stuff. He got into book publishing. And in 1940, they moved the offices when he passed away from Minnesota to New York City and Greenwich, Connecticut. And Greenwich is like about 10 miles from where I am recording this today. Fawcett published in the 60s and 70s the Little Fawcett Crest line of paperbacks. That was how everybody got their Peanuts book fix if they wanted. There were just millions and millions of these little 4x7 books with black and white reprints of Peanuts. That was Captain Billy's company, Fawcett, that published those things. So going back to 1940, they get into comic books and they create a character, and that character was just less than 2 years after the debut of Superman in 1938. And Michael, you'll probably be able to speak to this better than I can, but Superman starts the superhero comic book craze in 1938. Everybody and his brothers publishing a comic book, and Fawcett is no exception. And the character that they come up with that really clicks with people is a character named Captain Marvel. And it was the best-selling superhero comic in the 40s and in American superhero comic, and depending on how you look at it, possibly of all time. At one point, it was selling 1.4 million copies an issue. It was even being published like bi-weekly instead of monthly, which was, nobody did that in comics because it was so popular. So our man, C.C. Beck, was the art director of the Captain Marvel comics line from 1940, pretty much from the beginning of Captain Marvel, until it was shut down due to an extended lawsuit with DC Comics, who claimed that it was infringing on Superman. So Beck basically ran the most popular on the art side, not the story side, the art side. He did the most popular comic book line featuring superheroes that we have ever known.
And in serials, movie serials too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and probably a radio show. I don't know about the radio.
A TV show in the 70s.
Right, because just for one more piece of context, because of the names and the trademarks, because Marvel Comics came along and you have a character named Captain Marvel, it gets kind of weird because DC essentially shut down Fawcett Comics. They just dropped their entire line of comics in 1953 because they had been worn to a nub by DC suing them over a decade, trying to get them to stop publishing something that was actually beating their own character. And he's now a footnote in a way in comics history because he ended just chopped off in 1953 because of this lawsuit. DC brought it back about 20 years later with C.C. Beck as the main artist 20 years later, because he'd gone out of comics and he comes back in. And for a while he was drawing Captain Marvel, but under the name of Shazam, which you guys may know the name of because that's been movies, right? And TV shows. Yep. So Shazam is Captain Marvel. And the last thing I'll say about this before we jump into Mr. C.C. Beck and his opinions on how to make a successful comic and what you should not do is that, well, C.C. Beck was what he called a curmudgeon. And you will see this as I quote some of the things he's about to say. He is really going to have some very strong opinions about what makes good comics. And I want us to talk about those strong opinions and see what we think of it, because he was pretty much responsible for the most successful superhero comic in the United States of all time. So that's worth listening to, right?
Well,
absolutely.
True. One small fact, I suppose you guys probably know this. First Captain Marvel story, Simon and Kirby.
That's
Wow.
pretty
What?
cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. I did not know that.
Now, Michael, I asked you off air about how people viewed this Captain Marvel, which had ended in 1953. So it just disappears. There's this collector world that you were a part of in LA, leading you to create the first comic book price guide we always talk about at the beginning of every episode. What was the opinion after the fact? Like this would be late 60s, right? Mid-late 60s, where people are collecting old comics. You can't get them anymore. They're gone. What was the opinion of these Captain Marvel comics we're going to be talking about that C.C. Beck was responsible for?
Actually, the period we were doing that would be the early 60s.
Early 60s. Okay. So even earlier. So they'd only been gone for like a decade.
64, 65. Yeah, they only got 10 years, but that was like an infinite amount of time. I'd never seen one in the wild. But when me and my friend Tom started working at Collector's Books, and there were a lot of titles. It wasn't just Captain Marvel.
Right. It was Whiz Comics, Mary Marvel.
It was a whole family of characters. Many had their own books. Captain Marvel Jr. Yeah.
So what did you guys think of it when you looked at that compared to these other comics?
They were not taken seriously. To us, discovering the comics from the 40s was a real experience, but it was only the legit superheroes we were interested in.
And what made Captain Marvel not considered? What was it about it? You say he's not legit.
It was not. We never had paid any attention to it or bought any. They were dirt cheap because there were so many printed.
Yeah.
But mostly it was the fact that it was clearly a kid's book. And it's not the kind of thing, these stories were really stupid in the 40s. You go back and read them and go, this is ridiculous. Only a 7-year-old would read this. But Captain Marvel was even more extreme in that there was a talking tiger and Hoppy the Wonder Bunny.
The Marvel Bunny, yeah.
And all the family. So Captain Marvel, there was like an old version of Captain Marvel and a young girl version of Captain Marvel and a young boy version of Captain Marvel.
But the young boy version, Captain Marvel Jr.?
Yeah.
That's who Elvis based his look on.
Really?
Yeah, that is why he died.
Marvel,
he's blonde. He dyed his hair black with shoe polish to look like Captain Marvel
all right.
Jr.
Well, we've got interesting factoids. The model for Captain Marvel was Fred McMurray.
Fred McMurray, yeah.
Yeah, so you guys know him from My Three Sons, the Disney movies, like the Absent-Minded Professor.
Double Indemnity,
Double Indemnity.
Anyway, so getting back to the story, even though, we discovered this lost era, which was really only 20 years before, which we took, this stuff was serious. We didn't take Captain Marvel seriously.
So he's like the Archie of superhero comics, kind of.
There was so much of it, but basically, no. I mean, you take Archie was more serious than Captain Marvel. It's just, why would anyone read this stuff?
And yet, the most popular superhero comic of all time.
But when we go through this essay by C.C. Beck, his focus is definitely what comics should be for kids. I mean, he can't help it. That was the business he knew.
Yeah.
And I don't know to what extent that was told. This is what this is going to be. And then he fulfilled it. He certainly seemed to know exactly what he was supposed to be doing.
Oh, I'm sure he loved it. This was his style of drawing, and this was the kind of thing he can really get his teeth into. But he's a curmudgeon. So when he writes this, he's older, retired from the comic biz.
It was around 1980, probably, when he wrote this thing. He's kind of involved in early fandom as this figurehead who's not done a whole lot of comics recently, and he's still got a lot of opinions.
Yeah, and he's well respected, but clearly his opinions on what comics should be are comics for kids. He is a curmudgeon, so it's like, these comics today.
Kids these days.
Yeah, these days with those kids today and these comics they're reading. But he is fairly open-minded. He's not like he's a nut or anything. He's
he's got a
But his
track record that
rules
he's
are not.
calling back to that was
Yeah,
incredibly successful
yeah.
and
But
mostly
these rules,
forgotten or ignored or disagreed with in his
yeah,
time and later.
these rules do not apply today at all. But then again, he was in a different world.
Or maybe they
Where,
do, and
where,
we're just not doing them. That's what's interesting
yeah.
to me about this stuff, where you dig up something from someone's past who had great success, and then we've moved on for whatever reason. And there's like, is there any kernel of truth or wisdom in what he did? And can we look at the greatest comic strip artist of all time, Charles Schulz, and was he doing this somehow in his work, just like we were talking about the social media?
Well,
Was he
it's
kind
like,
of following these unwritten rules?
well, but he had different rules. The comic strip was a different medium.
Right.
And because Beck could do long form stories. And, looking back at Captain Marvel, you kind of go, when you look back at the 40s comics, go, why was everything so compact? I mean, they're cramming in, 8-page stories, even 4-page stories. And you're going, why? They could do like extended, stories like they do now, or something
Right.
goes 10 issues. Beck did that.
Yeah, the Monster Society. Is that what it is?
Monster
Yeah.
Society of Evil. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do
So
like
he did-
64-page long story,
Yeah,
all in
no one
one
else
book.
did that. So anyway, he is respected, but his curmudgeon-y attitude kind of put people off, I think.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of going, this is how you do comics. And then, but then again, in 1980s, Love and Rockets and
Yeah,
Watchmen, which
Yeah.
I think he would dismiss completely.
Yeah. And yet he was creating something that was more popular than almost anything that's been done even since. So yeah, let's take a look and let's see what we think about it. Why maybe it did lead to the most popular superhero comic of all time. Why we think maybe that doesn't even matter to us as artists. Well, this will be an interesting conversation, I think. So there was a guy, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I apologize. It's like Heinches. I think it's Tom. He does the amazing Hogan's Alley magazine. He's been doing it for years. He was the guy who was trying to stay in touch with curmudgeon C.C. Beck and just do interviews with him and get information out of him, because he was this lost piece of comics history. And he said he was really hard to deal with sometimes, especially on the phone. He'd answer things by letter, but he's just a tough guy to communicate with, because he said if I thrust, he'd parry. He was that kind of a guy. And Tom did not want to give up, and he collected some really interesting information from Beck. And I'm going to start out with just a brief piece of Beck's idea of what he was doing with Captain Marvel comics that made them so successful from an interview, and then we'll jump right into the 7 Deadly Sins. So Tom is asking Beck, what made this successful? How did you make these comics? What made them different than the other comics that were out there? The comics are kind of cartoony, wouldn't you say that? Versus, say, what a Superman comic might look like. It's a little more cartoony style. It's maybe a little simpler. Is that fair to say?
And it's also feels almost like a Proto-European clear line style.
Like
it's almost diagrammatic.
Yeah, Tintin, same kind of era.
Yeah,
little dot eyes, that sort of thing. Yeah, and it's a very clean look, very cartoony, very spare, I guess you could say. And he'll go into this a little bit. I'll share this right now. So Beck said, when I was illustrating comic books, I always considered the stories to be what we were selling, not the pictures. Now that's interesting. I looked on myself as a director-producer of a play. I didn't want to draw the reader's attention to the production itself, but to the story that the performers were acting out. Basically, he wanted to make it clearer and more easy to understand by young people. So again, he's thinking young people, obviously, as he's creating these things. And he said, to keep readers from having their attention drawn away from the stories, I deliberately used characters, settings, and props that would be instantly recognized by everyone, everywhere. In other words, stereotypes. So that's interesting as well. So he goes on to say, let's say if the guy is supposed to be a thug, he's going to have the 5 o'clock shadow.
Boy, that reminds me of Nancy.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
She who must not be named.
And Beck says, I treated my comic panels as views of a puppet show where heroes, villains, and other characters came into view from the left. So they walk in from the left side of the panel, the direction we're reading. They spoke their lines, and then they disappeared to the left if they were not to be used later. to the right if they were part of the ongoing story. Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
When characters fought, they fought each other. When they talked, they faced each other. When they ran across the stage, not out of it and into the laps of the audience.
Uh-huh.
This kind of presentation was in such a contrast to the superhero comics of the time. So he's talking about the 40s, that it caught on immediately and made Captain Marvel the biggest selling comics of the golden age. So simplicity and a set of rules that made sense to him, not trying to elevate the art at all, is really interesting that he attributes that to the success of Captain Marvel.
Yeah. Well, let me interject one thing here. The polar opposite was the other style that was very prevalent in superhero comics came from the Simon and Kirby studio, where the layouts were all over the place. People would break out of the panels and run towards you. It was really dynamic, but it wasn't really super clear storytelling.
Yes. Yeah. So those are the two kind of extremes, I guess, of what was going on in superhero comics.
And two that actually had an aesthetic and a vision. Most comics at that time, the people were doing them because they couldn't get other illustration work, and it was coming out just the way it came out. You know, Kirby had a vision, and Beck clearly had a vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to see them alongside each other is really interesting in terms of sales success. As successful as Simon and Schuster were in multiple genres, Simon and Kirby were successful in all sorts of genres of comics, and Kirby obviously has affected pop culture in ways that are kind of unimaginable because of all the things he did primarily with Marvel Comics. He's had the long-term impact, and Beck had the short-term impact. So let's get into our sins here by C.C. Beck. He says these are not laws, but, you know, he says in future ages, when people will look back at their work, they will shudder as they condemn its perpetrators to oblivion if they do not follow these. So this is kind of the over-the-top heated conversation you're going to get from a guy named C.C. Beck. Sin number 1, not staying within the limits of the medium. So he's saying comic pictures are basically line art with color added, small, framed with panel outlines, presented in sequence. Each picture should not be complete in itself, but should be only a part of the whole presentation. They're printed, more like woodcuts, so the artists who prepare the drawings should be aware of the limitations of printing. Too much fine detail is not going to produce properly. Comic pictures are small, only a few inches wide and high, and are viewed at a distance of a foot or so. Sounds like Scott McCloud going through stuff.
Yeah, really.
Readers will not back off to look at them as they might when viewing a large painting or a mural. You've got to keep all these things in mind. They should be simplified, easily understandable, as the reader will only glance at them out of the corner of his eye while reading the story they illustrate. As comic pictures are each only a part of a sequence of pictures, they should be separated from each other by being enclosed in panel outlines. Artists who use too many vignettes, montages, make the pictures in different sizes and shapes, Jimmy, are straying outside the limits of the medium and will lose their audiences, in quotes, comic readers, without gaining other audiences, such as the people who would go to a gallery or a fine art collection or readers of other kinds of printed material.
Yeah.
Okay, what say you?
He's totally wrong. I mean, clearly Kirby, his pages are selling for $30,000, $50,000, $100,000.
So they are now today's fine art collectors, you could say.
They're in galleries. They're influential. But he missed, this was written before the era where comics could be produced beautifully with beautiful colors and incredible detail. Yeah, he was working he just knew the business as it was limited then.
Mm-hmm.
It's expanded vastly since then. So most of the stuff just doesn't apply. You can't say somebody like, oh, that's too much detail in that panel. Because I'd go, my guy was Al Williamson. I went, boy, the more detail, the better. I can study this for an hour.
Yeah. What do you think, Jimmy?
Well, everything has to be viewed through my oppositional defiance disorders.
You and C.C. Beck have been a great conversation.
Oh, my God. I remember I went to Catholic school, first grade, the nuns up in front. We say we're going to study the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not. And I'm like, watch me.
That's not the
So,
intent.
yeah. So I can't. I think rules like this, they're all true except when they're not true.
Mhm.
And I do think clarity is really important, even if you can put a lot of detail in. It does, like Al Williamson can put a lot of detail in because he's Al Williamson.
Mhm.
And I think it's a weird thing, and Michael and I've talked about this. One of the reasons I put in detail in Shades of Grey was to cover the fact that the drawing itself wasn't very sound.
Yeah, I agree with that. I did that.
But if you're someone like Al Williamson, everything's perfect.
Mhm.
So, yeah, he could put as much detail in as he wants.
Right.
But if Al Williamson drew Captain Marvel, it wouldn't be particularly compelling or good. I mean, the art would be beautiful, but I don't know that it would necessarily, jive as a successful comic. But the other thing, because he said, like, you're not selling the art, you're selling the story. That is like the biggest canard people tell you. It was, good art can't save a bad story. That's simply not true. I have millions of comics in my collection that I have no interest in reading that are just beautifully drawn, and I don't feel like I got ripped off. There's comics I've read and looked at for decades that I've never read the story to, and I never will.
Could you argue that those will be a subset of the Captain Marvel type of audience he was serving in the 40s and 50s?
Well, yeah,
in
it
terms
might
of
be
how
that
many
I'm
people would want to look at it with a bad story, or
I think a lot of people must, because what Marvel pretends is the biggest selling comic of all time is X-Men #1, not the real X-Men #1, not
Right.
giant size X-Men #1, the one that came out in the 90s.
That got bagged and boarded in 2 million copies and never to be
with
opened.
8 different covers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that is, I don't mean, well, you know what? The guy who drew it is the publisher of DC Comics these days. It's not to my taste. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And I bet millions of people who bought it, aside from the ones that they put aside just to save to hoping it would be worth money. I bet a lot of people just looked at the pictures because the story's unreadable.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's good. I think what Beck is saying, if you want to make something that has value, maybe, but not necessarily that people will reject it.
Okay. Or the greatest success possible, right? Because he is the example of the greatest success possible in terms of numbers of people who would spend their dime to purchase that magazine in his day.
Yeah.
So I now turn it to Charles Schulz. Did Charles Schulz pretty much avoid sin #1 by the choices he made in the medium he was working?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, clearly.
I agree.
But he did not have a comic to work with. He had a tiny, tiny spot on a newspaper.
Maybe is that why he is the most successful comic artist of all time? Because he had those limits. Because he had to do the simplicity.
He's the greatest cartoonist of all time because he was a genius.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I also think there's something to it. Like, I do think if I were to be assigned by, the fates, you have to go back and redo Amelia so that it's guaranteed to be not just a success, but a blockbuster success. Well, I know that there's a bunch of things I put in there that are barriers to people entering. The vocabulary alone is a barrier to a lot of kids reading it, who's theoretically my argument. Then the layouts, the crazy, formal experimentation and all that sort of stuff. But if I didn't do that stuff, it wouldn't be what it was.
Well, in the famous words, in referring to the show I worked on, Mystery Science Theater 3000, the right people will get it. It's kind of, I'm creating a subset of people who are going to be really into this, but I know I'm limiting my audience. And Schulz somehow seemed to manage to carry off both in ways that are like the Beatles. You just kind of are in awe that they go. Almost everyone goes along with them. I'm guessing not doing sin #1 actually works heavily in Schulz's favor. So there's something to this rule that is being set out by Beck. There's something to that.
I think there's some part like really good art as like good illustrative art as, photography replaced illustrations in advertising and stuff, people lost the ability to see and appreciate what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
But it seems like they did.
Yeah. All right. Sin number 2, revealing presence of the creators. Now, what does he mean by that?
Well, my Eisner-nominated series In the Real Dark Knight would beg to disagree with that one. If I wouldn't have there wouldn't be anything.
Right. Well, this is interesting. I mean, what he's essentially saying is if you view a comic story as a play,
Yeah.
you want the characters to be focusing on each other. Don't break the fourth wall by having someone leap out of the panel, even if he's not looking at you. Don't let them ham up stuff. Don't have them do needless asides, pointless remarks. They can face the audience so we can see his expression. And this is the interesting thing with us and Peanuts is so many times when you guys say, and Charlie Brown looks at us and says, to me, he's not looking at us. He's looking like just off away from us. Like it's like you never look into the camera in a movie. He's not looking in the camera, but there are absolutely sequences where the characters do look at us. And Snoopy's a great example.
Yeah, all his thoughts, like last panel thoughts, are addressed to the audience, it seems like. Because no one can hear him, but he's looking out at you, and you're the only ones who can hear him.
To me, unless it's clearly Snoopy giving us a side eye or whatever, that's him saying into the void something that we get to see him almost full front face. But this is a fascinating one because Schulz, Jimmy, you said it again and again. Your favorite character in Peanuts is Charles M. Schulz. Did Charles Schulz somehow take this idea and elevate it in a way that almost nobody did, that takes I think there's truth in what Beck is saying, right? But it seems like he somehow transcends that and connects us to the characters even more. That's in a way that's pretty remarkable.
Well, this is something that I realized because I was thinking about it consciously while I was creating the first books, the first pages of In the Real Dark Knight, was that if I was going to do something that was truly, truly realistic, it has to acknowledge that it's not real. This has been something that has always been in my brain since I was a little kid. No matter how invested I am in Charlie Brown's baseball game, I am looking at line drawings on a paper, and I can't not look at line drawings on a paper. So I think what Beck, though, is saying is don't do something that cheapens it. Don't do something that removes the reader from caring about the world. But if you're great and you can do that, then it's even richer. And like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Annie Hall, Looney Tunes, there's a million examples of people who are able to do this and still make you care about, what's happening in the world. But it's really, really hard. But that's where great art comes from. I saw fairly recently an interview with Norm Macdonald, who is the comedian from Saturday Night Live. And he was talking about Sam Kinison explained that there's only 2 ways to write a joke. This is what he said to Norm Macdonald. And the first way is the Jerry Seinfeld way. See this completely unimportant thing that has no, like a Pop-Tart or whatever? I'm going to blow it up so it's the largest, most important, grandiose thing imaginable and make you think about it in every kind of conceivable way. And the other way to tell a joke is take something that is huge and diminish it to the point of nothingness and throw it away. And the cognitive dissonance between those points in either joke is what makes it funny. The farther away you get, right? The dumber the thing is that you're trying to make great, the better the joke is. But the more dangerous it becomes and the more likely it is to fail.
I think all these rules are ridiculous, including that one. And that's what people, who think too much think about. Humor can come in a million different ways. People like stick figures. If it's just a joke, then stick figures are fine. And there's a comic that was just stick figures. to me, it's like this is a bad joke. But there are people who like comics with stick figures. That's all they need to carry the joke.
And one of the most popular webcomics was a stick figure comic, and maybe there is, because of the simplicity, that's somehow that's where more people can connect than any detailed version of any character that you could draw beautifully.
I mean, for me, I want to see technique. If you want to simplify later, prove to me first you can really draw. And so Jaime Hernandez's later work is very simple.
Mm-hmm.
But I know he can draw as good as anybody in the world, and because he's proved it in his earlier work.
So you wouldn't have respected the later work as much if you hadn't seen the work that you saw at first?
Absolutely. And, he does stuff that's very influenced by Peanuts with little kids in his later work.
Yeah.
But once he proved to me he can draw anything, I know that when he decides to simplify, it's for a reason. He's doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
And it's not that he can't draw, because he can. And so I can see that Beck can really draw.
Yeah.
I mean, I posted to you guys this something he drew later on. And I'm like, boy, I wish I could draw like that.
Yeah, he was a painter. He was an all-around artist. He went to art school. Yeah.
Yeah. So when he simplifies the Captain Marvel stuff, it looks right, and it's because he knows what he's doing. And there's a lot of cartoonists, including, the early Image guys, who were selling more than anybody.
Yeah, right.
But you look at it and you go, this guy can't draw.
It's hideous.
Yeah.
It's so strange.
Yeah. So I like seeing somebody prove to me that they've got the chops.
Okay.
And then I'll accept anything they do after that.
Interesting.
Now, Schulz is a different case because it wasn't, he did a few things that, pre-Peanuts that was trying to be a little more realistic.
Yeah.
And maybe a Bill Malden influence. No, he was not a great artist. So his genius is to me is not the art. It's like he's a brilliant comedian.
Interesting. Well, and then going back to this sin number 2, and in this case, we were going a little bit afield, but that's okay because we're going to get there. Revealing the presence of the creators. By and large, for the most part, I think Schulz does follow these rules. He's not going crazy with things that would make us directly relate to the characters. But when he does, it has huge impact. And there's some weird mystery of Schulz's presence that's not in your face sometimes. Sometimes, like Jimmy's been saying, character wants it to rain, or Snoopy wants the water faucet to go on so he can fill his dog bowl, and then it rains and fills it's this kind of mysterious, delightful thing that's not necessarily maybe what Beck is griping about here.
Oh, and listen, I lost my own train of thought when I was talking about the Sam Kinison thing. Oh, but the point I was making was that the tension here is that you're building a world that you want people to believe in. And if you point out that it's false, you risk destroying the whole thing.
Yes.
But if you can somehow make that tension hum instead of be dissonant, it's super rich.
If now I'm creating a world for you to believe in that involves a creator, me, and you accept that, and you, then all of a sudden that is incredibly rich. And that's something that I don't think Beck would have seen. I'd be interested to ask him that if he'd be like, nope, or he'd be like, that takes a real genius. I'm in on that,
Because when he's making these, he's limited to what he can imagine would be done, based basically on what has been done at that point. So he's picturing a day at the Shazam offices where Captain Marvel flies in and sees CC Beck there and says, hey, Steve, that stuff's always lame.
Yeah.
But it's not the only way to do it.
No. Okay.
But I was thinking he's ignoring Will Eisner, who, certainly, even though he did get in the newspapers, and that's where most people saw the spirit, was totally concerned with storytelling above it all, and would use anything to tell the story, but it wasn't to make it easy to read for a little kid. It was just, it was an adult comic. It was probably the first adult-oriented comics.
Yeah,
Right.
probably.
Yeah,
Comic
published
book, yeah.
as little mini comics in the newspaper in color. Pretty crazy. All right, sin number 3, overdoing the job, meaning that artists overload panels with all sorts of things that you don't really need to put in them to tell the story, or doing crazy types of shots that draw attention to themselves, like a super panoramic long shot, or basically insane human anatomy that starts to get silly at some point because it's, the physiques of the characters, male and female, are so crazy different. He says that's taking you away from the reason this is here. It's to tell a story. What do you think about that?
Well, what would he say now? I mean, with comics being over the top.
Or the remember the 90s, the bad girl trend, the broken
Oh my
back.
gosh.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I only see covers of comics now.
Yeah.
I just go like, oh, yeah, this is basically pornography.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, overdoing the job. I mean, do you think that there, is less more often than more is more in art?
What
Well,
I find
there's
for-
a time
in my-
for detail. Alan
Yeah.
Moore, when he wrote his scripts, they're notorious for the amount of detail he put in it. So he spent a whole page describing like what's in the room.
Mhm.
It's for the artist could ignore that if he wanted to, but you want to establish the world,
Mhm.
and detail is the way to do it. So, I mean, do you know what Billy Batson's room looked like?
Right.
Well, let's do anything. We never did actually clarify this, so I'm glad you brought up Billy Batson, Michael, because so this comic, in going back to Michael saying this is mainly a kid's comic. So the alter ego of the boy, who I think is like a newspaper boy or something, is Captain Marvel. So he gets the power to turn himself into Captain Marvel whenever he says these words Shazam. And so what Beck would say about Billy Batson is he is truly the star of this show. Captain Marvel is a fulfillment of his fantasies, but he said the editors and the owners of the company said, get rid of Billy Batson. He's getting in the way of all the fun adventures. And Beck was like, no way. The reason the kids are buying this is because they see themselves in Billy. And so when he turns into Captain Marvel, they are Captain Marvel.
And that's the genius of that strip.
Yeah. Yeah, it's much better to wish, even though I love Robin, especially loved Robin as a kid. Robin is the sidekick.
Right.
He's not doing the cool stuff. Captain Marvel is the hero.
So you get to be the hero as an 8-year-old reading it.
Yes.
Well, yeah, or Captain Marvel is actually like an 8-year-old in a man's body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're totally, able to project into that.
And I don't think anybody did that as well as Captain Marvel until Spider-Man came along, and you got this kind of, this outsider kid who a lot of readers of that era could relate to.
Yeah. So, but I think it's important to establish what the world looks like, and you can ignore it later. It's just like become a convention in comics that you establish the scene, and it can be an insane amount of detail.
Right.
And then after that, you don't even need backgrounds because people know where they are.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what Beck is saying. It's don't use more than's necessary. Sometimes what's necessary is quite a bit.
Right.
And sometimes it's not. I think when I go wrong against this rule, or if I commit this sin, what I actually am doing is going, ooh, I'm really happy with the way this is coming out. And I'm going to, now I'm like adding stuff. I'm overdrawing. And that's a mistake. I think that it's not whether there should be detail or should be no detail. It's using the right amount of detail when you need it. Going back to Al Williamson, he did the Empire Strikes Back movie adaptation, 6 issues, best science fiction comics pre-Strange Attractors. And he did the asteroid field scene, which is the most dynamic. Like in 1980, the Millennium Falcon going through the asteroids was incredible in a film, and he does a great job of it in the comic, and that's entirely due to how he sells that spaceship and the textures of those rocks and the placement, all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But then the next panel, when you're in the Falcon, yellow, no background whatsoever.
No background. Yeah. And Beck does talk about this in other pieces of interviews, that's exactly what he's saying. Show it if you need to establish it in the most concise way possible to get the idea across. If you don't need to see it again, we know it's in the room. You're not going to see it. So going back to Schulz, did more or less Schulz follow or not follow the sin of sin number 3, overdoing the job? Was he?
Schulz is following this to the letter.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Let's go on to sin number 4, losing control. What does he mean by that? He says comic art can very easily get out of control. And as cartoonists, I'd like to hear your perspective on this. Characters in a story can take on a life of their own, do all kinds of strange things. Backgrounds, props, special effects can run away and overpower the whole production. Too much detail and too many things going on at the same time indicate that the writer or artist has lost control. And if a publisher tells you as an artist or writer to go hog wild, refuse to bow to such commands that will let essentially the quickest way to destroy a comic.
Well, thinking about this, tell this to Jaime Hernandez about losing control. Luckily, he had a publisher, which was fortunate. He also had a publisher who knew enough to stay out of it.
Yeah.
It's all about the characters taking on lives of their own and doing unexpected things.
Right.
And as people who've read this book for 40 years know that feeling of, I wish Maggie was back, with the punks in L.A. because she's now like cleaning rooms in a motel somewhere. Hey, that's the character he's following. It's the life of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
There is no story. It's just a life.
And that's like so special, particularly with Maggie in Love and Rockets. It's almost unique in comics.
Yeah. Would you call that losing control, or just the fact that let's say the character takes on a life of its own, and
that's what you want? I'd say that's the complete opposite of what he's saying. That's what you want when your characters start telling you what to do. You've got it. You've made it. You've created something that has some life in it.
That's really true.
I hear a lot of artists say that, and I've heard a lot of other artists kind of that is a point of contention that it's a fascinating one to anybody who's tried to create or do storytelling. Is it a good thing when your character becomes so rich that they start to take the story out of your hands and tell you what the story is? Or is there some point at which you, as the overseeing, can't let a character just take over the entire thing away from your intention?
But
that's a really interesting question.
It doesn't matter if it goes off the rails. Cerebus went off the rails so bad he lost all his readership. To me, it doesn't matter because he was doing what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Or what the character was telling him to do.
Or it doesn't matter.
Well, the character is you. That's the character cannot actually go out of control and start doing things. You're all there is. Every prop, every character is just the artist, right? I had not drawn Amelia for 12 or 13 years, and I had written 2,000 Donald Duck pages, all that other Disney stuff, 2 graphic novels for Scholastic. And I sat down to do Amelia and Rhonda talking to each other. And it was just like 5 pages just in a notebook in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Almost on autopilot.
Yeah. Because you know them so well. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're just there talking. And it's like, oh my God. Well, first off, what idiot would give this up?
Right.
And secondly, even though that was the right thing to do because I was burned out and had no ideas. But and it allows me now to come back and go, oh yeah, no, these characters are rich and I can trust them because they're not separate from me. Anything that's there in them, I put there.
Right. Now, if you had written 25 pages, there is some aspect of you that would say, okay, I'm not going to lose control because the characters, as I wrote them initially here, because they were talking and I was following the line of these rich characters, I got to edit out 80% of this for the sake of the story. There's a control level there that I think is legit.
Yeah.
People can indulge a line of thought through character or whatever.
Yep.
So
that is true too. It doesn't imply that everything you then think of
is genius.
is genius and gold and needs to be
as
it.
rich as the characters are and are filling in those spaces automatically. And that is a sign of an amazing character. I mean, anybody who discovers characters that they can write and draw that have that kind of life in them, that really is, I think, a tremendous measure of success and enjoyment as an artist, right?
Yeah, I think people would be shocked if they looked in my notebook. Well, first off, they'd be shocked and appalled at my handwriting. But if they got past that and thought, wow, yeah, this guy has issues, I think they would be shocked at how much gets cut.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good thing. That that the editor in you is strong, and that's a good thing. So I'm going to step
Scott
back
Weinstein,
again.
who was the guy who, well, he's still, I guess, the Weekend Update anchor on SNL, said once they feel they're in a good position when they're cutting good jokes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that's definitely
right?
a good position to be in. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to now step back and say, Charles Schulz. Did Charles Schulz avoid the problem of losing control?
No. One look at that 1970s strip, the Beagle dinner, where Snoopy's the speaker and it's being broadcast on TV.
That was losing control.
Or the blanket that becomes a hand. Or I think that he was much more, because he does have something that CC Beck doesn't have, in the fact that, like, the next day they were gone, and he was able to do stuff, and then truly abandon the things that he didn't want to incorporate going forward.
Yeah.
But I think he lost control.
There's one factor we're ignoring here, and I don't know the answer to this, but who wrote those Captain Marvel stories?
Otto Binder wrote a bunch of them.
All right, so keep in mind, C.C. Beck did not write these stories.
That's correct. He is just trying to make them come to life and augment the story.
Yeah.
Script was supreme to C.C. Beck.
Yeah, which is a different perspective.
Yeah, that's a whole different story. I mean, what would Schulz would never, even if a reader sent in an idea that was the funniest thing ever, Schulz would never do it.
Well, I think Schulz, he tested his own boundaries of his own world. I wouldn't say he lost control, though. I mean, he seems like a guy who is, just by his nature, very much in control of his world in a pretty tight way.
Peppermint Patty accidentally going to the dog school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's testing boundaries. He loved going into the sort of the sillier spaces, and sometimes we'd come along with him, and sometimes we're like, no, thanks, Sparky.
Right.
But it seemed like it almost seemed pretty calculated.
Oh, I think it is. Yeah.
So controlled, but maybe, yeah. He'll
you
got to
at least skate towards the edge of chaos, or you're not going to know.
Right.
You're not going. I was listening to an interview, a baseball interview, and they were, because it was a rain delay, and so they're just killing time. And the one guy talks to one of the former players, and he goes, what is it that causes someone to go on, like, just a bad streak? They go 0 for 10 or whatever. Is it they just lose something? And the guy goes, actually, sometimes it's someone that's at such a high level, and what they're doing is trying to push through to the next level. And you never know when you've gotten to the point that there is no next level to you.
Yeah.
Until you get there and can't do it.
Yeah. I think that's true. And I think Schulz constantly was testing his own personal boundaries, for sure. So, yeah, I think he generally followed this rule in the sense that Beck is saying, but I think he's more adventurous than Beck, and we are all beneficiaries of that.
Absolutely.
Sin number 5, tastelessness. The best thing that can be done is not to offer the public things which are in bad taste and which degrade both the public and the producers of products. There are no subjects which ought to be barred from books by edict. Sex, rape, murder, incest, crime, perversion, all that stuff is legitimate for books and pictures, but not everything is suitable for presentation in comics. And then he kind of goes back to the idea that comic strips are a different sort of art and are read mostly by adults, but he sees comic books from his perspective as mostly for children, just by the reality of things in 1980. But he said, even if you're doing a comic strip where mostly adults are reading it, you should be presenting this with taste and restraint.
Well, talk our crumb.
Right.
Yeah, he's had He's like an old curmudgeon. This is a curmudgeon-y thing.
Well, or he's also talking to people who are specifically trying to follow in his footsteps, right? I don't think I'm getting the feeling that he's talking specifically about if you want to do commercial four color, comics in the 20th century. This is what you'd have to do.
Or newspaper strips. In this case, he goes specifically there. Yeah.
Again, going back, like defining tastelessness, I think that X-Men comic that we talked about earlier is pretty close to tasteless.
Mm-hmm.
It's garish, it's violent, it's not well written, and all this sort of stuff. All of that can be considered tasteless, and it was successful.
Yeah.
But I think he's right in that. The R. Crumb thing that's another example. If you're R. Crumb, you can do it. Mm-hmm. If you're not, maybe you can. Or Eddie Van Halen. Oh, I love hearing Eddie Van Halen play. I don't want to hear anyone try to play like Eddie Van Halen because it always becomes tasteless.
Right. Okay. Because it's not yours, and it's just
you're putting on a suit that doesn't fit, and then it's like, look at me, I'm doing the shocking thing. Look. Where Crumb feels like he's compelled to and doesn't even necessarily want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see what you're saying about that. And we've talked about this quite a bit, the idea, things that are, I appreciate what he's saying here. It's something to keep in mind, right? That if something that's in bad taste that could degrade both your audience and yourself, think about that when you're creating. Can you avoid that? That's probably a good thing to do.
Crumb is totally about debasing himself. That's what most of the strips are, is Crumb debasing himself.
Yeah, but again, he's working at such a high level that through that, it somehow elevates him. Yeah. But he's one in a million artists.
Oh, he's the genius of the 20th century.
So
forget this Picasso guy I've been hearing about.
All right, so Charles Schulz, did he avoid the sin number 5 of tastelessness?
Yeah, him and Crumb, not quite in the same ballpark.
Okay, so we'll say he was pretty much avoided sin number 5. Sin number 6, pandering. Oh,
I think he avoided that.
Such comic book publishers. Yeah, so basically, if you're pandering, that basically means giving readers what they think they want, right?
Right.
So he's saying if you cater to the taste of the lowest members of society, one who wants sex, violence, razzle-dazzle, it's the Freddie Silverman years of ABC. 1979.
Yeah, right.
Constant titillation of senses. That's what makes civilizations go down the drain. History proves this. When literature and art...
Bad news, CC.
When literature and art
picked up since then.
Well, we did go down the drain.
That's right. He nailed it.
It's nice here.
It's a sign that the public is not getting what it needs, but what it needs least, pandering to the wants of the lowest, most mindless of its members. So there you go. That's C.C. Beck's take on pandering.
About Nancy.
Well, I get that, like well, I mean, I've had real opportunities to pander. I mean, okay. I remember with when Amelia was just when we got the 2006 books out, and we didn't sign on, but Ben Haber was working with us, who's a movie producer. He produced the Smurfs movie and stuff like that. And he's like, okay, well, I can take you to this publisher, and you just do Amelia, but do it exactly like the Wimpy Kid format. And but that's a lot of money to say to, and I did.
Yeah.
And I
don't. What was it that would have been pandering in that case?
It would be, you're the guy who happens to be standing here, so we're going to take your talents as whatever they are, and we're going to apply it into this, jam it in, regardless of whether it fits or not, because we know it'll be a success.
Okay.
And I can't. And to me, that would be disrespecting Amelia, which I feel like I got magically.
No, could you say that is, I don't even know what you call it, a genre, a medium? It's doing it in a different way that's more text heavy. For those not, I'm familiar with Wimpy Kid.
Oh yeah, it's a hybrid book, and I've written them. I've written Donald Duck hybrid books and stuff like that. It's mostly text. It doesn't seem like that. Comic.
What about it was it said, hey, this is a bridge too far for me, and this character who has been given to me, why is this a betrayal of the integrity of that?
It was just the whole vibe. It was
Mhm.
because not him. He is great. I love Ben. He's a great guy. But then talking to the people in publishing, and it's like, oh yeah, well, there's gonna be the next one.
Mhm.
So being the second person to do it is great,
Yeah.
because and this is just openly talked about, like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, the barriers are broken and people are looking for it. So you put in this,
Yeah. It's now
you
a
just slot
genre.
in. And by the way, someone did that. It's called Dork Diaries.
Oh my gosh, there's tons of them, yeah.
And Simon Schuster published it, and it's a monstrous success.
Mm.
But I don't want to be that person.
So in other
Yeah.
words, it's really how you see the work yourself. I'm assuming there could have been an artist who saw it from a different light and saying, this is a new genre. I can apply my talents to it and make it my own, and I'm
Yeah.
great with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. You really have to have your own way of seeing it that makes it work for you. Otherwise, it's pandering, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So Charles Schulz, pandering. Did Charles Schulz pander to his audience?
I don't think so. Michael?
I think he let people pander for him, which
Interesting point.
I can see that.
disapprove of.
So you're talking about merch, that kind of thing?
Merch and
Animation.
the animation. He let other people, because would he have said no if they said, well, we're going to start drawing Snoopy like cuter? So
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I think he would have been a nightmare to work with on those animated specials, especially in the early days. Because keep in mind,
yeah,
all of them are taken from his strips. There's nothing else that's like that.
Yeah.
He might not have been there every day, but he was like, you're doing my work or we're not doing this.
right. Don't go off on your own flights of fancy. Although, I don't know. In some cases, I think there was some more collaboration in that regard. I think was it the Thanksgiving special was the first one that they did that was just entirely original, but it was from his ideas. But once it got later and later into the system, there was such amount of product. There was actually a TV series coming out. Those are incredibly strip oriented. They just kind of fade in and out of 4-panel rhythms. And it's like nothing in animation you've ever seen because they are following the rules that Schulz set up, and he was not going to allow them to just go hog wild.
Which is the opposite of pandering. Hey, we're going to put a show out on Saturday morning that's going to be unlike every single show around it.
Mm-hmm. Because our artist requires it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Okay. We'll give him a pass on this one, at least for his own, certainly for his own strips. Final sin number 7, breaking the rules. Okay. Many of the rules governing the production of literature and art are broken because of ignorance. Okay. And there are exceptions to rules, but you need to follow the rules of the medium you're working in, right? So he's saying, although comics have never been placed very high on the list of worthwhile reading material, the art in them is not regarded as much value by most art experts. It's not highly regarded even by some of the people who produce it. Why make things worse than they already are by not following the general rules
Wait.
of
At
comics.
this point, CC his blood sugar had dropped.
Well, yeah, he had 6 deadly sins.
There's a huge logical fallacy here.
Okay.
It's okay. There are no rules. I'm going to make the rules. Rule number 7, don't break the rules.
Yeah, he's basically chiding anybody who disagree with 1 through 6, right? He's saying, if you don't know what produces good results equaling the best-selling comics that I made, and you don't follow my rules, then you're going to get better results if you would heed what I have to say.
Look at the period of his greatest success, the 40s. There were no rules. There were so many weird comics. They're just so, you look at them and they're just so bizarre. No one could have thought this was going to be a success. But the guy created Superman. He followed up with Funny Man, who was a guy who walked around in a clown suit and had little boxing gloves on a spring come out of his chest.
Right.
There were no rules. They tried, let's try everything and see what sticks.
Well, it's interesting that, they were sued over Captain Marvel looking like Superman. So obviously, C.C. Beck visually is taking on the superhero genre, and he's trying to codify it for the most successful, accessible comics readership for kids. And he succeeds in spades. He beats Superman in his own game. And to him, that's success.
No, it's not even the same game. That lawsuit is the most insane thing in the world because There was hundreds of Superman ripoffs.
Right.
And DC
Captain
sued.
Marvel wasn't one of them.
Right. Yeah. Right.
DC
But
sued
they
a
had the
lot
money.
of people.
They were
Right.
successful.
Well, they finally gave up because I guess sales were dropping.
Well,
But
what happened?
Captain Marvel had no relationship with Superman whatsoever.
Even before Captain Marvel got the lawsuit slapped on them, Fawcett was sued about another character whose name I can't remember. But because it wasn't the success that the other one was, they're like, okay, we'll just drop it and make a new one. But because Captain Marvel out of the gate was just this blockbuster, they were willing to fight. And I agree. I think, it goes back to that idea that the first person who does something original, second person does it as a ripoff, third person is now part of a genre or whatever.
Right.
I think the argument it went back and forth in the courts for literally like a decade. And then there's this famous judge named I love his name, Learned Hand is the actual name of this judge. And after it had gone in favor of Fawcett and then it went in favor of DC, ultimately her Learned Hand said, okay, to me, this is clearly infringing on Superman, which is weird given that how many characters, I guess to Learned Hand doesn't matter that there's 30 or 50 or 100 copies of Superman. I still believe that Superman was so essentially copied as a superhero that they can claim that they own that space. I mean, it seems weird to us today. I kind of think it wouldn't have held up, but they could have continued the appeal, but sales were dropping by 1953. Fawcett's like, we're just going to get out. Here, we're going to stop publishing this thing. We're going to pay $400,000 to DC and just be done with it. And it's so funny that 20 years later, DC's licensing the rights to those characters so they could do it again and ultimately bought the character.
By the way, this is going on in the world right now. Fender Guitars, having not defended their trademark on the Stratocaster for 70 years, has suddenly decided to send cease and desist letters to every guitar manufacturer in Europe.
Good luck.
That's making similar guitars.
Because that is the rule of the trademark, right? If you don't defend it, you lose it.
Yeah. Right,
you've got to sue people. You got to send cease and desist or it goes away.
Yeah, but 70 years.
That's crazy. Yeah. Good luck. Okay, well, let's just end this with, so breaking the rules. Schulz, did he break the rules?
Yeah, he created the rules.
I think he kind of did, right? He did break rules and in ways that we accepted, which shows off his genius.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Harold, this was great. A great idea to do this.
Yeah,
I
Harold,
really enjoyed it.
You're a great interviewer. You should do a podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate. I'll consider it someday.
Hey, and thank you all for listening. Lo, these many episodes. 200, can you believe it? Let's do 200 more.
Hey.
But right now we're going to rest.
Yeah.
Yes.
So until next time, for Michael, Harold, and Liz, this is Jimmy saying, be of good cheer.
Yeah.
Yes. Be of good cheer. Unpacking Peanuts is copyright Jimmy Gownley, Michael Cohen, Harold Buchholz, and Liz Sumner. Produced and edited by Liz Sumner. Music by Michael Cohen. Additional voiceover by Aziza Shakrala Clark. For more from the show, follow Unpack Peanuts on Instagram and Threads. Unpacking Peanuts on Facebook, Blue Sky, and YouTube. For more about Jimmy, Michael, and Harold, visit unpackingpeanuts.com. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.
They're shiny, and they smell of brass and hope.